Wait, you came straight from your shift? She said, staring at his work boots. To a blind date? Like that? He didn't blink. The insult landed, slid off, and died on the linen. Then a woman's voice drifted from behind the carved partition, smooth, certain, carried on laughter. If that building can't run without me, it deserves to fail. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. His finger stopped mid-reach for the water glass, because he knew that voice the way you know thunder before rain. His boss was 10 feet away in a private room, while he sat in public pretending he belonged. He didn't rush to explain the uniform. He didn't apologize for the scuffs or the faded shirt. He adjusted his cuff, kept his shoulders steady, and met her stare with a calm that felt almost defiant. That calm wasn't pride. It was practice. And tonight was already turning into the kind of situation practice was for. The hostess had seated them in a quiet corner, which meant close enough to hear important people breathe, far enough that no one important had to look at them. Linen so white it felt like a test. The restaurant sat at the base of the same corporate tower he kept alive after hours. Daniel Mercer had clocked out less than an hour ago. The tower's hum still lived in him. Fans, pumps, elevators, access doors answering commands. He'd meant to go home, check on Lena, and sleep before sunrise like always. But Maya Roth had insisted he try one normal thing, and he'd said yes because his daughter deserved a father who didn't vanish into work and silence. Maya sat across the table now, not the one who'd mocked him. The mockery belonged to her friend, the blind date itself, a woman with perfect nails and a smile that never warmed. Maya's gaze was different, watchful, like she noticed how his attention kept drifting to exits and ceiling vents. So, the blind date said, tapping the menu, "What do you do besides maintenance?" He could have offered the simple label, night shift building tech, contractor badge, fixes what breaks when executives go home, but he'd learned how fast a label became a verdict. "I keep things running," he said. Behind the partition, the private room laughed again, controlled, expensive laughter. Daniel's stomach tightened. Victoria Hale, CEO, the voice from trainings, the voice that could cut a person down without raising volume. Maya's eyes flicked toward the partition, then back. "Is that who I think it is?" she murmured. He didn't answer. His mind did what it always did under pressure. Map doors, count seconds, listen for the first crack. A service corridor lay behind the bar. An emergency panel was hidden on this floor behind a wall. The tower and this restaurant shared systems he touched every night. His phone buzzed once against his thigh. He glanced down. The sitter. Lena coughed again. She's asleep now. Inhaler. Helped. Relief hit, then guilt. He pictured the star sticker on her nebulizer and the pharmacy receipt folded in his wallet. Every shift mattered. Pride didn't pay for refills. Across the table, the blind date leaned back. "A man should aim higher," she said, like she was being kind. "If you're still doing that kind of work at your age, it says something." It did say something. It said he showed up. He breathed in slowly. "It says I am reliable," he replied, calm, even, not pleading. Maya studied him. "You don't talk like someone who's only ever been maintenance," she said. He kept his face still. Once, he'd built systems for places like the tower. He'd been the person called when alarms weren't drills. Then life broke, and he chose the job that kept Lena close and the bills paid. The past stayed quiet because quiet was safer. A server moved too fast, nearly colliding with another tray. Someone whispered urgently near the kitchen doors. Daniel's head tilted. A low vibration rolled through the floor, subtle but wrong, like a motor straining against a command it couldn't complete. The lights didn't die. They hesitated, a flicker that lasted a fraction too long. The air conditioning stuttered, then surged. The restaurant's music skipped, corrected itself, and returned again. Daniel's gaze snapped to the exit sign. It dimmed, then steadied. Behind the partition, Victoria Hale's voice sharpened, the laughter gone. "No, don't tell me maybe. Fix it." Daniel shifted forward in his chair. He wasn't standing yet. He wasn't making a scene. But his mind was already inside the building, hands already on invisible switches. From somewhere above, a relay clicked, clean and unmistakable, followed by a distant warning tone that didn't belong in a restaurant. The first alarm didn't scream. It whispered. The whisper became a pulse, low and rhythmic, threading through the floor and into the soles of his boots. He stayed seated, but his spine straightened, every sense tuning the way it always did when systems drifted out of tolerance. Around them, most diners kept talking, the sound lost beneath cutlery and music, but the staff noticed. You could always tell by the way they paused mid-step, eyes flicking upward as if answers lived in the ceiling. The blind date frowned. "Is that normal?" "No," he said quietly. The lights dipped again, longer this time, just enough for a ripple of unease to pass through the room. A server steadied a tray with a laugh that came out wrong. From the bar, someone muttered about a power surge. Daniel didn't look at the fixtures. He listened. The air conditioning surged hard, then cut, then came back uneven, like a runner gasping for breath. Maya leaned closer. "You okay?" she asked, reading his stillness as tension. "I'm thinking," he said, and meant it. Behind the partition, chairs scraped. The private room's door cracked open, and a slice of tailored suits and sharp perfume spilled into the restaurant. Victoria Hale's voice cut through it, clipped and controlled. "I don't care whose fault it is. Get engineering on the line, now." A man in a security earpiece nodded too fast and moved away. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose. This wasn't a simple outage. The staggered responses meant competing commands, automation fighting manual overrides. He pictured the building's backbone, the way subsystems talked when they shouldn't. Someone upstairs was panicking and making it worse. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it for half a second, then checked. The sitter. She's breathing fine now. But the power flickered here too. His jaw tightened. The tower fed half the block. If it went unstable, it wouldn't just be executives inconvenienced. It would be kids sleeping, machines running, people trusting invisible systems. A low chime sounded near the hostess stand, followed by a muted announcement that cut off mid-sentence. A few diners laughed nervously. Someone clapped, thinking it was part of the ambience. The blind date rolled her eyes. Figures, even the building's falling apart. Daniel pushed his chair back, just enough to test the floor. The vibration had shifted. Less hum, more tremor. "I need to take a look," he said. "Take a look where?" she snapped. "You're not staff here." Maya stood with him. "Let him," she said, already stepping aside. "He knows something's wrong." He moved toward the bar, scanning for the service corridor door. A young server blocked him instinctively. "Sir, guests aren't allowed back." "There's a panel behind that wall," Daniel said, pointing without looking. "If the building's cascading, you'll want eyes on it before the locks start arguing with the fire system." The server hesitated, torn between rules and the way his voice carried certainty. The hesitation cost them another flicker, sharper now, followed by a soft thunk, as a door somewhere closed when it shouldn't have. From the private room, Victoria Hale stepped out fully, phone pressed to her ear, irritation etched into every line. Her gaze swept the restaurant and snagged on Daniel mid-stride. Recognition didn't hit yet, just annoyance at a man out of place. "Who is that?" she demanded, to no one in particular. Maya met her eyes. "Someone who's trying to help." Victoria's stare flicked to the boots, the worn jacket. Dismissal settled in. "This is being handled," she said coldly. "Sit down." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't bristle. He simply said, "It isn't." The room went quiet enough for the next sound to land hard. A distant alarm, this one unmistakable, climbing toward a register that made people's skin prickle. A manager hurried over, sweat beading at his temples. "Ms. Hale, engineering says there's a conflict between access control and emergency protocols. They're working on it." Daniel nodded once. "They're tripping each other. If you don't isolate the loop, you'll lock doors you need open." Victoria turned on him sharply. "And you know this how?" "Because I've seen it," he replied. For a beat, she stared, weighing whether to ignore him or use him, pride lost to fear by a fraction. "Fine," she said. "You explain." He glanced at Maya, then at the staff gathering, then at the exits, witnesses, stakes. "There's a service corridor behind the bar," he said. "If I can get to the local panel, I can stop the cascade before it hits the upper floors." "And if you're wrong?" Victoria asked. "Then you lose a few more minutes," he said evenly. "If I'm right, you don't lose the building." Another alarm chirped, closer this time. Victoria's jaw set. "Do it." As he moved, he caught Maya's eye. She gave a small nod, something like trust. "By the way, if stories like this make you lean forward and hold your breath, make sure you're subscribed, because this is only the beginning of how this night turns." He slipped through the service door, just as the light steadied into an uneasy glow. The whisper in the floor deepening into a warning that no one else seemed ready to hear. The service corridor smelled like citrus cleaner and warm metal, a narrow spine running parallel to the restaurant's polished calm. The door clicked shut behind him, muting the chatter and leaving only the building's real voice. Fans ramping unevenly, a relay chattering somewhere above, the distant groan of an elevator braking too hard. He moved fast without looking rushed, boots sure on the scuffed floor. The local panel was where it was supposed to be, hidden behind a fire-rated cabinet with a scratched label no guest ever read. He knelt, fingers already counting screws, listening for the rhythm beneath the noise. Automation loops didn't lie. They stuttered when frightened. The panel came open to a wash of blinking indicators. Too many greens. Greens meant systems were insisting everything was fine. "Of course," he muttered. He traced the logic in his head. Access control receiving conflicting commands, emergency protocols pinging but not seizing priority, a manual override fighting a central directive. Someone upstairs was clicking boxes they didn't understand. Someone with authority. Footsteps echoed behind him. He didn't turn until a shadow fell across the open panel. "You're not authorized to be here," a security officer said, hand hovering near his radio. He looked up slowly. "Then call it in," he replied. "But if you wait for permission, you'll lose the stairwells." The officer hesitated. Another distant alarm chirped, higher now, and cut off abruptly like it had been smothered. The officer swore under his breath. "You've got 2 minutes. "Plenty," he said, already reaching in. He isolated the loop with a practiced twist, fingers dancing over, hardware he'd touched 1,000 times in another life. The building answered immediately, the tremor easing, the fans finding a steadier breath. Somewhere above, an elevator chimed in protest, and then settled. He stood as Victoria Hale swept into the corridor, heels sharp against concrete, eyes blazing with controlled fury. Up close, her presence filled the space the way corner offices did, meant to make people shrink. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Stopping your systems from arguing," he said, without heat. "You don't get to freelance in my building." He closed the panel and finally met her gaze. "It's the only way to keep it from locking people in." Her mouth tightened. "My engineers are handling it." "They're chasing symptoms," he replied. "You need to let one protocol lead." She stepped closer, invading space, trying to reassert gravity. "And you're the expert now?" A radio crackled on the officer's shoulder. "Stairwell C just failed to unlock on a test. Repeat, failed to unlock." Victoria's eyes flicked to the radio, then back to him. The calculation happened fast. "Fix it," she said, "not a request." He nodded once. "I will, but you need to stop overriding from upstairs." Her laugh was sharp. "I don't take orders from—" Another sound cut her off. A child's cough, tinny and amplified, echoed through the corridor speakers before cutting out. A glitch, a misrouted audio feed from somewhere in the building. It hit him like a fist. His phone buzzed in his pocket, insistent now. He didn't check it. He didn't have to. The cough lodged behind his ribs, every protective instinct flaring. He turned back to the panel, hands steady, because they had to be. He rerouted priority, giving emergency control the authority it needed. The building responded in waves. Locks releasing, fans recalibrating, alarms resetting to standby. The officer's radio crackled again. "Stairwell C is green, doors opening." Relief rippled through the corridor, but Victoria didn't soften. "Who are you?" she asked, the edge dulled but present. He wiped his hands on his jacket. "Someone who knows this place," he said. "You work maintenance," she said, dismissive again, grasping for the familiar hierarchy. "That doesn't make you—" "It makes me here," he cut in quietly. "When your people aren't." Silence stretched. In the distance, the restaurant noise seeped back, tentative laughter testing the air. The crisis wasn't over, but it had paused like a held breath. Maya appeared at the end of the corridor, eyes wide, relief flickering when she saw him standing. "They're asking questions out there," she said softly. "People noticed." Victoria's jaw clenched. Witnesses. He saw it land. "Get back to your table," Victoria snapped at Maya, then stopped herself. She looked at him again, really looked this time. Not the boots, not the jacket, but the way he stood, the way the building seemed to have quieted around him. "What do you need?" she asked, clipped. "Access to the central interface," he said. "And for you to stop pushing buttons." Her nostrils flared. Authority bristled. Then another alarm chirped, faint but rising. "Fine," she said. "You get access. One chance." He nodded. "That's all it takes." As they moved toward the elevator lobby, the building hummed underfoot, calmer now but alert, like a patient stabilized but not healed. He felt the weight of eyes on his back, the beginning of something shifting. He didn't savor it. He thought of Lena's cough, of stairwells unlocking, of systems that only worked when someone listened. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the ascent to where decisions were made. And this time, he was going with them. The elevator doors closed with a muted thud, sealing them into a box of brushed steel and reflected tension. As it rose, the hum beneath their feet changed pitch, smoother now, but still threaded with unease. He stood near the control panel, eyes unfocused, listening through the metal the way a doctor listened through a stethoscope. Victoria Hale watched him from the opposite wall, arms crossed, expression carved into something unreadable. The security officer hovered near the door, radio pressed close, murmuring updates that came too fast and too vague. Words like partial recovery and still unstable floated up, then vanished into the whine of cables. "Don't touch anything unless I tell you," Victoria said. He didn't respond. He felt the building lean, not physically, but in the way systems leaned when they were about to tip again. Somewhere above them, a command was cued that shouldn't be. The elevator slowed, then stopped short of its floor with a jolt that made the lights flicker. The officer swore. Victoria grabbed the rail, heels skidding a fraction. He moved before fear finished blooming. "Hold on," he said, voice steady, grounding. He reached the panel, popped it open with practiced ease, and rerouted the brake command that had stalled mid-execution. The elevator sighed, then continued its climb as if embarrassed by the hesitation. Victoria stared. "You said you wouldn't touch anything." "I said unless I needed to," he replied, closing the panel. "You want out or not?" The doors opened onto the executive level. Glass, polished stone, the air cooler and quieter, like sound itself had been trained to behave. The contrast hit hard. This was the world that never saw the service corridors, never smelled cleaner or warm metal. This was where decisions were made and consequences outsourced. A cluster of engineers waited near the central interface, faces tight, hands hovering over tablets like prayer. They looked up as Victoria strode in, relief flickering and dying when she gestured sharply. "This is the man I told you about," she said. "He's assisting." One of the engineers frowned. "Ma'am, we're all ready." "Step back," she snapped. "All of you." They hesitated. He felt their eyes on him now, the boots, the jacket, the audacity of his presence in a place that ran on credentials and glass walls. He didn't flinch. He stepped up to the interface and scanned the readouts, the logic tree branching wrong in 3 places at once. "Who authorized the manual override on access control?" he asked. A young engineer swallowed. "I did. The alarms wouldn't stop." "That's because you told them not to," he said, not unkindly. "You muted the messenger and left the fire." Victoria bristled. "Watch your tone," he glanced at her. "Watch the building." Another alarm chirped, closer now, sharper. He leaned in, fingers moving, isolating the conflict, giving emergency protocols the authority they'd been denied. The interface resisted, then yielded. The building's response rippled outward, fans stabilizing, locks releasing, systems aligning behind a single voice. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it until the vibration stopped, then reached into his pocket, hands shaking just enough to notice. He checked the screen. The sitter. She's coughing again, powers flickering here too. The words blurred for a heartbeat. He forced them back into focus. He breathed, slow and deep, the way he'd learned when panic wanted the wheel. He pictured Lena's room, the inhaler, the way she trusted him to keep the world steady. "Are we done?" Victoria demanded. "Not yet," he said. "You've got a secondary cascade coming if you don't reroute load from the upper floors." "That will shut down executive offices," an engineer protested. "It will keep the grid from failing," he replied. "Pick one." Silence fell, thick and heavy. Victoria's jaw worked. This was the moment, the one where power decided whether it cared about image or people. "Do it," she said finally, clipped. He executed the reroute. Lights dimmed across the floor, then steadied. Somewhere below, a cheer rose, faint but unmistakable. The building exhaled, tension draining in a way you could feel in your bones. Victoria watched the data settle, then looked at him, something like disbelief edging her irritation. "You said you work nights," she said. "Maintenance." "I do," he replied. "That doesn't explain this." He shrugged once. "It explains why I'm here." Maya appeared at the doorway, breathless, eyes shining with adrenaline. "They're talking about it downstairs," she said. "People saw the locks release. They're asking who fixed it." Victoria's gaze flicked to the glass walls, the watching engineers, the security feeds showing clusters of staff and diners craning for answers. Public space, witnesses. She turned back to him. "You're not done," she said. "You're coming with me." "To where?" he asked. "The lobby," she replied. "If this flares, again, I want you where everyone can see you." The words landed heavier than she intended. He nodded slowly. "That's probably wise." As they headed back toward the elevators, the building felt different underfoot. Not calm exactly, but attentive, like a thing that had recognized a familiar hand. He walked with them into the glass and light, the labor zone left behind, carrying with him the knowledge that the next failure wouldn't be quiet, and that this time it would happen in front of everyone. The lobby was already crowded when they stepped out of the elevator, a living cross-section of the building's invisible hierarchy, forced into the same space. Executives in tailored suits stood beside kitchen staff and security, everyone watching the ceiling as if answers might drip down from it. The marble floor reflected nervous movement, shoes scuffing where confidence usually glided. The moment he entered, the hum underfoot shifted again. Not louder, worse. A delayed echo in the systems, like a heartbeat skipping every fifth beat. "Why are people still here?" Victoria snapped at the building manager. "Stairwells are open, ma'am, but the transit doors are lagging," the manager said. "We're holding until we're sure it won't embarrass us," he translated silently. A woman near the front of the crowd pressed her palms together, whispering into her phone. A child clutched her leg, eyes wide, the emergency lights casting strange shadows across his face. That image lodged somewhere deep and immovable. He crossed the lobby without waiting for instruction, drawn toward a freestanding emergency console meant for optics more than function. The screen glowed an anemic green, cycling reassurances that meant nothing. He placed his hand against the casing and felt the vibration immediately. Feedback traveling through conduits that shouldn't have been active together. "Don't touch that," a facilities supervisor barked. "That console doesn't do anything." "That's the problem," he replied, already kneeling. Victoria watched him with folded arms, jaw tight. She was losing control of the narrative, and it showed. "Explain," she demanded, in plain language. "Your systems are stabilized but not harmonized," he said. "They are obeying, not agreeing. If the load spikes again, they'll fight." "And if they fight," she asked. "They'll choose wrong," he said. "Doors over people, power over air." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone cursed softly. His phone buzzed again. He didn't need to look to feel the fear behind it. Lena's cough echoed in memory, amplified by the child standing 10 feet away. He slid the phone back into his pocket untouched and focused on the console. "Security," Victoria said sharply. "Clear this area." "No," he said, standing and turning to face her. Calm. Unshakable. If you move people now, you'll spike the load. You need them still for 30 seconds. She stared at him, incredulous. You don't give orders here. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. Then you can watch it fail. Another tremor rolled through the floor, subtle but undeniable. The lights dimmed, then steadied again, thinner this time, like a lie repeated too often. Victoria looked around, at the executives watching, at the staff, at the security feeds flickering on a wall nearby, showing stairwells packed with people waiting for direction, witnesses everywhere. 30 seconds, she said, clipped. He nodded once and dropped back to the console. He bypassed the cosmetic interface, pulling access through a maintenance port hidden beneath a branded panel. The system resisted, then relented, like it recognized him despite the years. He fed it a single priority voice, aligning subsystems that had never been meant to negotiate. The building responded immediately. The hum evened out. The emergency lights brightened, not glaring, just enough to feel honest. Somewhere overhead, fans synchronized, the sound smoothing into a steady breath. A collective exhale swept the lobby. Load stabilized, a voice crackled over security radio. Transit doors responding normally. Applause broke out in uneven bursts, then stopped as quickly as it started, uncertainty clamping down again. People looked to Victoria, waiting for the story she would tell them about what just happened. She stepped forward. The situation is under control, she announced. Our teams. It's not finished, he interrupted. Not loud, but clear. Heads turned. The interruption landed harder than shouting would have. Victoria's eyes flashed. Excuse me? You stabilized the present, he said. Not the next 10 minutes. You need to shed executive load, or the spike will come back. An engineer stepped forward, pale. He's right, she said quietly. The projections... Victoria closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, something had shifted. The room felt it. Shut down the top 3 floors, she ordered. Now! Gasps, protests, then movement as commands finally aligned. The hum settled into something close to peace. He stepped back, muscles finally acknowledging the strain they'd been holding. Maya appeared at his side, eyes bright with something between awe and worry. They're all watching you, she murmured. I know, he said. And because moments like this were why stories like his mattered, why unseen people mattered, he added, quietly but deliberately. If you're watching this unfold and you believe the quiet ones usually carry the real weight, make sure you're subscribed. Nights like this are just getting started. Victoria turned toward him, the crowd parting instinctively. Who are you? She asked again. But this time, the question held something like respect. He met her gaze. Someone who doesn't want your building to hurt anyone. From above, a final alert chimed and resolved. The crisis hadn't ended, but it had chosen its side. The lobby settled into a fragile calm, the kind that held only if no one breathed wrong. He stood just off the main path, hands loose at his sides, listening for what the building would say next. Systems always spoke after a correction. They whispered their grudges, tested boundaries, searched for the weak seam no one wanted to admit existed. Victoria moved closer, lowering her voice. If this spikes again, you're staying in front of it, she said. It wasn't a request. It wasn't quite an order either. He nodded. Then we should move people away from the glass, he replied. Pressure shifts don't play nice with crowds. She glanced at the walls, then at the cluster of executives who'd inched forward, hungry for proximity to control. "Security," she said sharply. "Back them up." As the crowd repositioned, the sound changed. A thin whine threaded through the steady hum, climbing just enough to make his teeth ache. He closed his eyes for half a beat, mapping the architecture from memory. Upper floor shedding load, transit doors synchronized. That left one place everyone forgot. "Basement systems," he said aloud. An engineer frowned. "Those are isolated." "They're supposed to be," he replied, "unless someone tied them in to save money." Victoria's mouth thinned. "Show me." They moved fast, cutting through a side corridor meant for staff and deliveries. The air grew warmer as they descended, the smell of damp concrete and electricity replacing polished stone. Emergency lights painted everything amber, honest, and unflattering. The basement control room greeted them with a chorus of alerts blinking in patterns that didn't agree. He stepped in like it was familiar territory, because it was. He'd stood in rooms like this years ago, hands younger, but just as steady, making calls that couldn't be undone. "Who authorized auxiliary tie-ins?" he asked. A facilities manager swallowed. "It was approved, years back, cost efficiency." He exhaled slowly. "You built a shortcut into your spine." The whine rose, sharper now, joined by a stutter that rattled the racks. The floor trembled. Not enough to panic anyone else, enough to tell him the truth. His phone buzzed again, insistent, impossible to ignore. He checked it this time. The sitter. Power dropped for a second. "She's coughing. I'm okay, but..." He didn't read the rest. He didn't need to. Something hot and protective flared behind his ribs. He locked it down, the way he always did, and turned back to the room. "Listen to me," he said, voice cutting through the noise. "If this loop collapses, you'll lose ventilation in sections that still have people." Victoria stiffened. "How long?" "Minutes," he replied. "Less if someone panics." She looked around the room at the blinking lights, the people waiting for her to decide. Power finally had a cost she could feel. "Do what you need," she said. "Now." He didn't waste time explaining. He pulled a worn multi-tool from his pocket, the one Lena had given him after taping a star sticker to the handle. The sight of it steadied him. He bypassed the auxiliary tie, isolating the shortcut that never should have existed. The system fought back, alarms flaring in protest. "Hold steady," he murmured, not to them, but to the building. "I've got you." He rerouted load manually, fingers flying, mind 3 steps ahead of the readouts. The whine dipped, surged, then smoothed. Fans kicked in hard, then found rhythm. The tremor faded. A cheer rose from the stairwell beyond the door, muffled but real. Someone laughed, shaky and relieved. He sagged a fraction, letting his shoulders drop for the first time since it began. Victoria stared at the stabilized board, then at him. "You didn't hesitate," she said. "I couldn't," he replied. "There are kids in this building." The words landed, harder than any accusation. A radio crackled. Ventilation restored, all zones green. He closed the panel and stepped back. The room felt different now, lighter, like a storm had chosen another path. He checked his phone again, fingers clumsy. The sitter. "She's breathing easier. Power's back. She asked for you." Relief hit so fast it made him dizzy. He pressed his thumb to the star sticker, grounding himself. Victoria cleared her throat. "We're going back upstairs," she said. "People are asking questions." He met her gaze, calm and unyielding. "Then answer them." As they headed for the stairs, alarms silent behind them, he knew the crisis had crossed a line. It wasn't about systems anymore. It was about who everyone would remember when the lights came back on. They emerged from the stairwell into a lobby that no longer felt like a waiting room, and more like a courtroom. The crowd had grown, drawn by the quiet that follows near disaster, when people realize they're safe and want to know why. Phones were out now. Security had stopped trying to shoo anyone away and instead formed a loose perimeter, less about control than optics. He paused at the edge, taking it in. The building's hum was steady, honest. No hidden tremor, no whispered argument between systems. For the first time all night, it felt like something he could trust. Victoria stepped beside him, posture straight, expression composed. Up close, he could see the calculation settling in behind her eyes. Not fear, not arrogance, but strategy. She was deciding how this would be remembered. A facilities manager leaned in, whispering urgently. She listened, nodded once, and waved him away. "We're live," she said to no one in particular. A hush rippled outward, people sensing a pivot. He felt eyes on him again, boots, jacket, the fact that he didn't belong where he was standing. Or rather, that he did, and no one knew what to do with that. Victoria lifted her voice, controlled and clear. "Thank you for your patience. There was a systems conflict affecting access and ventilation. It's been resolved." Murmurs rose, questions stacking. Someone shouted from the back, "By who?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at him, the smallest beat of hesitation betraying her. He held her gaze, not challenging, just present. "The issue was identified and corrected," she said finally, "by one of our people." The words landed wrong. He felt it in the room, the way relief curdled into curiosity, the way the truth strained against the phrasing. Maya appeared at his side, eyes bright, voice low. "They saw you," she said. "They know it wasn't one of them." A security monitor behind the desk flickered, looping footage from the stairwell. Him kneeling at the basement panel, multi-tool flashing, the star sticker catching the light. Someone had clipped it already. A few phones tilted, recording the recording. Victoria followed the line of sight. Her jaw tightened. He stepped forward before she could redirect again. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough. "People were stuck," he said, voice carrying in the quiet. "The systems were fighting each other. That's all." A man in a suit scoffed. "And you are?" "A maintenance tech," someone said from the crowd, unsure if it was an insult or a title. He nodded. "Night shift." Laughter bubbled, nervous and disbelieving. Then it faded as he continued. "This building's designed to listen to one voice in a crisis," he said. "It wasn't doing that. Now it is." An engineer near the front cleared her throat. "He's understating it," she said. "The auxiliary tie-ins, those were legacy decisions. He isolated them manually. I've never seen anyone do that without a full shutdown." Heads turned. A ripple moved through the executives, the weight of words like legacy and liability sinking in. Victoria inhaled, slow and deliberate. When she spoke again, the tone had changed. "He's correct," she said, and his actions prevented a much larger failure. The admission hung there, delicate and dangerous. Someone else spoke up, a woman holding a child whose eyes were finally losing their glassy fear. "He told us to stay still," she said. "He said it would help. It did." More voices followed. Small confirmations, lived proof, the story knitting itself without permission. Victoria watched it happen, then did something unexpected. She stepped aside, opening space instead of closing it. "Tell them," she said to him quietly. He felt the moment press in, the urge to deflect, to minimize, to disappear back into service corridors where truth didn't require speeches. He thought of the basement whine, of the cough over the speakers, of the star sticker under his thumb. "There's nothing to tell," he said. "You pay people to keep things running. Sometimes that means listening to the ones you don't usually see." The room absorbed it, the simplicity cutting deeper than any reveal. Victoria nodded once. "Tonight," she said, turning back to the crowd, "we listened." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then stronger, rolling through the space until it felt like release. He stood in it, not basking, just breathing. Maya squeezed his arm. "You okay?" she whispered. He glanced at his phone, unread messages waiting. "I will be," he said. Victoria faced him again, eyes steady now, stripped of theater. "We need to talk," she said, "about how this happened, and about you." He met her gaze, calm and unflinching. "Then let's do it in the open." For the first time, she smiled without calculation. "Agreed." As the crowd began to thin, the building stood quiet and whole around them. The crisis had passed, but something else had begun, a reckoning that wouldn't fit back into private rooms. And he knew, as surely as he knew the sound of a healthy system, that this was only the middle of it. The lobby thinned in reluctant layers, people peeling away only after they'd memorized the scene enough to retell it later. Security guided foot traffic toward open exits, and the building settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than forced. He stayed where he was, near the edge of the marble floor, aware that this pause mattered just as much as the crisis itself. Victoria didn't rush him. That alone was new. "Come with me," she said, not sharp, not commanding. "We need to make sure this doesn't unravel again." They moved toward a side conference space off the lobby, glass-walled and unmistakably executive, but still visible to anyone passing by. He noticed that detail immediately. So did she. Inside, engineers gathered again, this time quieter, deferential in a way that hadn't existed an hour earlier. Data streamed across a wall display, stabilized curves, resolved alerts, a system finally telling the truth. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, listening. The building was calm. The danger now wasn't mechanical, it was human. "The auxiliary tie-ins need to be removed permanently," he said. "Not patched, not documented, removed." An engineer nodded quickly. "We can schedule—" "No," he interrupted gently. "You do it now, while the system remembers what healthy feels like." Victoria studied him, then turned to her team. "Do it," she said. There it was again. Authority, this time aligned. As the engineers worked, Maya hovered near the glass wall, catching his eye when she could. She looked like someone watching a line of dominoes fall exactly the way she'd suspected they might. "You okay?" she mouthed. He nodded once. His phone buzzed in his pocket, softer now, less frantic. He stepped back, checked it. "Lena, Daddy, lights are back. Can you come home soon?" His chest tightened. "Soon," he typed. "Promise." He slipped the phone away and refocused. The display flickered as subsystems disengaged from shortcuts they'd leaned on for years. The building adjusted, like a spine cracking back into place. Victoria exhaled slowly. "This should have been caught," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "It was," he replied, "just not listened to." She looked at him, really looked. "You speak like you've been on the other side of these decisions." He didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. The room already knew. A junior engineer cleared her throat. We're stable across all zones, she said. No projected spikes. Relief settled in, deeper this time. The kind that let muscles unclench and thoughts wander back to what mattered. Victoria turned to him. I owe you, she said. He shook his head. You owe your people, he replied. Make it easier for them to speak up next time. Silence followed, thoughtful rather than tense. Outside the glass, a few lingering staff paused, pretending to check phones while clearly watching. He felt the weight of being seen, not as spectacle, but as reference. Maya stepped inside. People are already sharing clips, she said softly. They're saying things like, listen to the quiet ones. He huffed a breath. Figures, she smiled. By the way, she added, glancing past him toward the imaginary audience beyond the walls. If you're following this, and you believe moments like this don't happen by accident, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this don't end when the alarms stop. Victoria arched an eyebrow at that, but didn't object. The engineers finished the last reroute. The display settled into a clean, boring normal. He loved it. We'll do a full review, Victoria said. Publicly, he met her gaze. Good. And about you, she continued, choosing her words. You shouldn't be invisible in this building anymore. He considered that. The service corridors, the nights, the way anonymity had been both shield and cage. Visibility's only useful if it changes something, he said. It will, she replied. I'll make sure of it. He believed her, not because she was powerful, but because tonight had cost her something. His phone buzzed again. Lena, can you read the rocket book tomorrow morning? He smiled despite himself. I need to go, he said. My daughter's waiting. Victoria nodded. We'll finish this tomorrow. As he turned to leave, the building felt different underfoot. Not grateful, just honest, like a place that had learned who it could rely on when the lights went out. And as he walked back toward the exit, boots echoing softly, he knew the hardest part wasn't fixing systems or standing up to power. It was making sure this moment didn't fade back into silence once everyone went home. The exit doors slid open with a sigh, releasing him into the cooler night air, mercantil moment. He just stood there, letting the building's steady hum fade behind him, replaced by traffic and distant sirens. The city felt louder after the quiet intensity of the lobby, like the world rushing back to claim its space. He started toward the bus stop out of habit, then hesitated. The streetlights flickered once, just once, and held. His shoulders loosened a fraction. Tonight had taken more out of him than he'd expected, not in sweat or strain, but in the way being seen always did. Visibility carried its own weight. Hey, Maya called, jogging to catch up. She fell into step beside him without asking, the easy confidence of someone who decided this moment mattered. You don't disappear fast, do you? He smiled faintly. Usually I do. Tonight's not usual, she said, glancing back at the building where a few silhouettes still lingered near the glass. They're still talking. Let them, he replied. Talking doesn't keep the lights on. She studied him as they walked. You know this isn't over, right? I do, he said. He could feel it in the way the night pressed close, in the echo of Victoria's words. Visibility, change. Those things didn't resolve cleanly. They asked for follow-through. They reached the corner where their paths split. Maya stopped, hands in her coat pockets. For what it's worth, she said, I'm glad I dragged you out tonight. He nodded. Me too. She hesitated, then added, If you ever want coffee without alarms, I'll call, he said, surprising himself with how easily the words came. She smiled and turned back toward the building, leaving him alone with the night and his thoughts. The bus ride home was quiet, the city rolling past in tired layers. He watched reflections slide across the window, faces, lights, movement, and thought about how many people moved through systems they didn't understand, trusting them anyway. Trust was fragile. Tonight had proven that. When he reached his stop, he jogged the last block, keys already in hand. The apartment lights were on, warm and steady. He pushed inside to the familiar smell of chamomile and clean laundry. Lena sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, inhaler resting on the coffee table like a small sentinel. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Daddy!" He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt, pulling her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. The tension he'd been holding finally broke, leaking out in a rush that left him dizzy. "You okay?" he asked softly, brushing her hair back. She nodded. "The lights came back, and Mrs. Alvarez stayed." "Good," he murmured. "I'm sorry I was late." She looked up at him, serious in the way only kids could be. "Did you fix the building?" He blinked. "How did you—" "I heard you on the phone once," she said. "You said buildings talk." He laughed quietly, a sound that surprised them both. "Yeah," he said. "They do." She smiled, satisfied, and settled back against him. He sat there longer than he needed to, just holding her, listening to the normal sounds of home, the refrigerator hum, a car passing outside, the soft tick of the clock. Systems working the way they should. His phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it until Lena shifted, already half asleep, then reached for it carefully. A message from Victoria waited at the top. "Tomorrow morning, public review. I want you there." Below it, another message from an unknown number, already previewed by a string of notifications. Saw the footage. "Is it true you—" He locked the screen and set the phone face down. Not tonight, he thought. He carried Lena to her room, tucked her in, and read the rocket book she loved, tracing the pictures with his finger until her breathing evened out. When he finally turned off the light, he stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall. Back in the living room, he sat at the small table and let himself think. About the auxiliary tie-ins that would be removed, about engineers who'd speak up next time, about a CEO who'd learned, publicly, that authority without listening was just noise. Tomorrow would bring questions, labels, offers, maybe, pressure to step fully into the light or retreat again into the service corridors that had kept him safe. He didn't know yet what he'd choose, but he knew this. The building would remember tonight. People would too. And once systems learned a better way to work, they resisted being forced back into silence. He picked up his phone, typed a single reply to Victoria. "I'll be there." Then he set it down and turned off the lamp, letting the apartment settle around him, quiet and whole. Outside, the city kept breathing, and for the first time in a long while, so did he. Morning came with a thin winter light that made everything feel sharper than it needed to be. He stood just inside the glass doors of the tower, jacket zipped, hands steady, watching people gather for the public review Victoria had promised. Cameras clustered near the front desk. Staff badges flashed. Executives moved with a careful energy, like people who knew the floor beneath them had once shifted and might do so again. He hadn't slept much, not from fear, but from the strange alertness that followed being seen. Lena had waved from the window as he left, inhaler tucked into her backpack like a talisman. The promise of coming back mattered more than anything waiting inside this building. The conference space off the lobby filled quickly. Glass walls meant no hiding. The feeds were live by design. Victoria took her place at the head, composed and precise, and waited for the room to settle before speaking. "We're here to review last night's incident," she said. "What failed, why it failed, and how it was resolved." Eyes flicked to him, then away, then back again. The footage had circulated. He could feel the curiosity pulling at the edges of the room. An engineer stood to present, voice steady but hands tight around a tablet. Charts came up, timelines. The auxiliary tie-ins glowed red on the display, an ugly vein threading through clean architecture. "These connections were approved years ago," the engineer said. "They bypassed safeguards. During the cascade, they amplified conflict." "And who identified that?" Victoria asked. The engineer swallowed and glanced toward him. "He did." The word landed without a name attached, like a finger pointing. Murmurs rippled. A board member leaned forward. "Based on what authority?" "Based on experience," the engineer replied. "He recognized the pattern immediately." Victoria turned toward him. "Stand up," she said. He did, slowly. The room adjusted around the movement, lenses finding him, attention tightening. He didn't smile. He didn't shrink. "For the record," Victoria said, "state your role." "Night shift maintenance technician," he said. It sounded small in a room built to magnify titles. "And before that?" a voice asked from the back. Curious, sharp. He felt the moment crest, the urge to deflect, pressed in, familiar and tempting. He thought of the basement whine, the cough over the speakers, the way the building had quieted when he listened. "Before that," he said, "I helped design systems like this. Crisis response, fail-safe architecture." A beat, then another. A board member frowned. That background would have been disclosed. "It was," he replied calmly. "It just wasn't remembered." The engineer stepped in again, emboldened. His credentials matched the original framework we still use. He referenced decisions no one here made. Heads turned. A few people went still, recognition dawning the way it did when a puzzle snapped together too late. Victoria nodded once. "He was never hiding," she said. "We just didn't look." Silence followed, thick and instructive. A reporter raised a hand. "Why was someone with that expertise on maintenance?" He answered before Victoria could. "Because my daughter needed me home at night," he said, "and the building needed someone who wouldn't panic." The honesty cut deeper than any resume. The room shifted, power recalibrated. Questions came fast then, about the shortcuts, about accountability, about why warnings had been muted instead of addressed. Victoria answered them without deflection, naming decisions, accepting responsibility where it belonged. Each admission cost her something. Each one bought credibility back. When it was over, the feeds cut. The room exhaled. People stood in clusters talking with a new caution, a new awareness of who did what when things broke. Victoria approached him as the space cleared. "I want you on the review committee," she said. "Publicly." He met her gaze. "I don't want a title," he replied. "I want the shortcuts gone." "They will be," she said, "and I want you to help make sure of it." He considered the glass walls, the open doors, the eyes that still lingered. "Then listen," he said. "When the quiet ones speak." She nodded. "I will." As he turned to leave, an engineer caught up, eyes bright. "Thank you," she said, "for last night, for today." He smiled faintly. "Just keep listening." Outside, the city moved on. unaware of how close it had come to something worse. He stepped into the light, phone buzzing with messages he didn't read yet. Offers would come. Labels would follow. He could feel them circling. But for now, he headed home, carrying with him the weight of a truth made public. That dignity didn't announce itself with power, and systems only worked when the people inside them mattered. Behind him, the tower stood quiet and honest, its glass reflecting a man who had walked in unseen and walked out undeniable. He left the tower with the kind of quiet that followed storms, the city already rearranging itself around yesterday's danger. By afternoon, the headlines had softened into summaries, and the footage looped with calmer captions. What remained wasn't spectacle, but consequence, and that was harder to shake. At home, he folded laundry while Lena colored rockets at the table, narrating launches in a whisper. The ordinary sounds felt newly precious. He moved slower than usual, letting each small task finish itself. When his phone buzzed, he checked it without urgency. Victoria's message was concise. Review findings released. Auxiliary tie-ins removed. Oversight changed. Thank you. He set the phone down and returned to folding, the hum of the refrigerator steady and trustworthy. Gratitude mattered, but follow-through mattered more. He wanted the building to remember in ways that didn't require his presence. That evening, Maya stopped by with coffee and a paper bag of pastries. She didn't make it a moment. She never did. They sat at the small table, steam rising, and talked about nothing urgent. Her work, Lena's rockets, the way nights felt different when you weren't braced for alarms. They're saying the review changed things, she said. People are being asked to explain decisions they used to slide past, he nodded. Good. And you? She asked. What do you want now? He considered the question, the honest weight of it. I want to keep my nights, he said, and make sure the quiet warnings get heard. She smiled, soft and knowing. You can do both. At the tower, changes rippled outward. Engineers met without fear of interruption. Security protocols were rewritten with people in mind. Maintenance logs were read instead of archived. It wasn't perfect. It was better. Victoria held a town hall a week later, standing in the lobby without a podium. She spoke plainly, named failures, and described the fixes. She didn't use his name unless asked. When Sui Fei Midalgim, she did. She credited the work, not the person. Afterward, she found him near the service desk. You were right, she said. Visibility only matters if it changes something. He nodded. It's changing. She extended her hand. He took it, firm and brief. Respect settled where arrogance had once lived. The nights resumed their familiar rhythm. He walked the corridors, listening, adjusting, noting the places where systems still whispered. He trained a junior tech to trust their instincts, to write things down even when no one asked. He left notes in margins that invited questions. At home, Lena's breathing steadied with the seasons. The rocket book grew dog-eared. Mornings returned to their gentle chaos, cereal spilled, and laughter quick. One night, as he checked a panel near the lobby, a security guard paused. Hey, the guard said, uncertain. Thanks, for last time. He nodded, simple and sincere. Anytime. The building hummed, honest and whole. He felt the satisfaction of work done well, not applauded, just right. That was enough. When his phone buzzed again, it wasn't an alert or an offer. It was a photo from Maya, coffee mugs clinking, a caption that read, Soon. He smiled and typed back, Soon. The city breathed. Systems worked. People listened a little better than before. And that, he thought, as he headed home, was how change actually stayed. The night shift ended the way it always did, quietly, without applause. He signed out at the small desk near the service corridor, the pen leaving a familiar groove in the paper, and took one last walk through the building. Fans hummed in steady agreement. Panels blinked green without argument. The tower felt settled, not because it was perfect, but because it had learned where to listen. Outside, dawn thinned the dark into pale gray. He stepped onto the sidewalk and let the cold air wake him fully, hands deep in his jacket pockets. The city didn't know his name. It didn't need to. What mattered was that the lights stayed on for people who trusted them. At home, Lena was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug, rockets lined up in careful rows. She looked up when he came in, eyes bright. "Morning," she said, like it was the easiest thing in the world. "Morning," he replied, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. They ate breakfast slowly, talking about planets and school, and the way clouds looked like maps if you stared long enough. He walked her to the bus stop, holding her hand until the driver waved them forward. When the bus pulled away, she pressed her face to the window and blew a kiss. He stood there until it disappeared around the corner. Life didn't reset after moments like the one they'd lived through. It folded them in, quietly. The tower kept running. The review committee met and disbanded. The shortcuts stayed gone. Warnings were logged and answered. None of it was dramatic. All of it mattered. He kept his nights. He kept listening. When a junior tech hesitated, he waited. When a guard reported a vibration that didn't show on a screen, he checked it anyway. Trust grew where fear used to sit. Sometimes people recognized him in passing. A nod, a thank you. He returned them and moved on. Being seen was no longer a shock. It was just another part of the system, useful when it worked, dangerous when it didn't. On a Saturday morning, he met Maya for coffee, sunlight cutting through steam as they laughed about nothing urgent. She watched him over her mug. "You ever think about how close that night came?" she asked. "All the time," he said. "That's why I don't forget it." She nodded. "Good." Back at the tower, Victoria held to her word. Town halls stayed open. Decisions came with explanations. When she spoke, she invited interruption. Power learned to share the floor. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. One evening, as he finished a round, he paused by the lobby windows. The city reflected back. Movement, light, people heading home. He thought of the night a whisper became a warning, of how easily it could have been ignored, of how often it still was, everywhere. The truth settled in him, simple and steady. Dignity didn't arrive with titles. It arrived with responsibility, with showing up when it counted, especially where power never looked. He turned away from the glass and headed out, the building breathing easily behind him. Tomorrow would bring new problems. It always did. But now there were more ears tuned to the quiet signals, more hands willing to steady the work before it shook. At home, Lena was already asleep, the rocket book open on her chest. He tucked it aside and sat with her a moment, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. This was the victory that mattered, not recognition, not offers. This. If you want the next story, tell me the title you want to hear next. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Single dad fired for leaving early. Then the CEO's child asked for him by name. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?